Welcome back, beautiful people, to the Make Mental podcast. As always, Caleb Munski, but today we have something new and something exciting for you. I would be lying if I said I wasn't excited, but again, I think I say that for every guest. Mental health just fires me up. But today, all my nutrition junkies, you are in for a treat. So, whether this is your cheat day or not, go ahead, grab that chocolate bar, buckle up, grab your notebook, whatever you have to do to pay attention to this episode, make sure you do. We have on Kelsey Poulter, a coach, a nutritionist, and an advocate for student athletes. Kelsey, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Caleb. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, I know off camera we said we've been trying to do this for a while, but the timing had to be right. And I really hope it is. Before we jump into the nitty gritties of the episode here, the nitty gritties. English is going to be tough today, noted. Here we go. Before we jump into the nitty gritty of the podcast, my community, Kelsey's community, wherever you're coming from, let us know what you need. And I'll speak for the podcast right now, but I'm sure Kelsey is the same way, especially with her individualistic approach to nutrition. Let us know what you need. That's what we're here for. If we don't know, we can get people like Kelsey on for you that do know from my community. And I'm assuming Kelsey's the same way. Forgive me if I just spoke for you, but we can jump into the nitty gritty. Kelsey, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what we might be chatting about today?
Sure. Yeah. First of all, super excited to be on here. Love mental health, love talking about it. I'm a huge advocate for that and to kind of normalize it in a way because I think everyone needs mental health. You don't have to wait till it's mental illness to be mental health. So I love it. My name's Kelsey Poulter. I am first and foremost, I'm a wife and a mom, so that's super fun. I have an 18-month-old and he's kind of the light of my life. And then my other baby is my Next Level Athletes business, and we coach athletes. Specifically, it was born with the nutrition side of things. So we help high school and collegiate athletes on the nutrition and recovery side of things. But it's evolving more. We're bringing in some. It's funny you have me on today because we're bringing in some sports psychologists to create courses within our program and to kind of fill holes that are an athlete's life. And that kind of goes back to my origin story of being a collegiate athlete myself and seeing certain things that had held me back. But anyway, that's a little bit about me. And yeah.
Yeah, I love the fact that you start off with who you are as not an athlete. I think a lot of times, especially when you're in the heat of it, that's all you identify as. If you're an athlete, your sport. If you're not, your schoolwork, your job, your occupation. Again, athletics is what we're going to focus on for the means of this episode, but it applies elsewhere, right? Whatever I argue, whatever your time is consumed with the most, that's where your identity is mostly placed. But it's so important to know that just because it's where you spend most of your time doesn't necessarily mean it's what's most important to you. So I'm glad to hear that your family means the most to you. That's exciting because I feel the same way. Even though I spend a lot of time after work on this little venture, I want to know for you, again, I'm hoping to ease into it here, so forgive me if I'm going too quickly. Was nutrition something that was a focus of your entire life, or was it not until you got to college and realized more in depth what nutrition was that it took such a big role in your life?
That's a good question. No. The short answer is no. It was not always a part of my life. Looking back, I had a mom and I was blessed with a mom who cooked home cooked meals for me and my siblings. And they were balanced. Like there was always a fruit, there was always a vegetable, there was always protein, there was always a carb. And so I don't even know if she knew she was doing it. She was just being the chef that she is. And so I think that a lot of my life and a lot of my athletic career, I was fueled right. But when I got to college and I didn't have my mom anymore, and I had the cafeteria that was kind of down from my dorm and stuff, I caught myself under fueling. Looking back on it, I didn't know I was at the time, but I mentioned to you earlier when we were talking, I would be heading into a 2.5 hour practice followed by a 1.5 hour lifting session on, I think I had like a small protein shake in the morning, like 100-calorie protein shake. And then I'd follow it up with at like 12 p.m. right before my practice with a chicken, like a chicken breast and green salad which is absolutely like I would be so upset if my athletes were just eating that going into a practice. So looking back on it, yes, during high school and during my years, because I had my mom, but throughout my collegiate career, no, I wasn't focused on it at all. And until I dove into the studies and getting into anatomy and physiology and nutrition classes and stuff in college, I didn't realize what I had been missing.
Yeah, it's like the reverse case scenario of you don't know what you're missing until it's gone. You didn't know what you were missing until it was there. And I think
Yes.
that's a pretty neat way to look at it. And from the mental health aspect, you can't really beat yourself up for something you didn't know, as long as you weren't purposefully doing it, right? You didn't know you were underfueling, even though you probably knew something was a little off, because we've all been there. Like, well, you can skate by, right? Athletes are so result driven or goal oriented, right? If you hit your goal, sometimes that's just enough, especially when you have 10 other classes to get through that day, right? There's so many other places you can put your focus. But when you start to focus on yourself holistically, right, mind and body, that's when you can start to excel in every aspect of your life, whatever that looks like for you. Personally, I was similar to you, except I masked my eating with sports drinks, coffees, sodas, and a lot of McDonald's. I should have bought stock. I would be rich right now if I bought stock in McDonald's. But my metabolism is super high on top of all that sugar and all the other poor ingredients that are in there, that I never gained unnecessary weight. So like I couldn't even dirty bulk if I tried. And then secondly, it was still giving me enough energy to get through the day. And then I would wonder why I couldn't fall asleep until 3 in the morning. And then my sleep, it was just a poor cycle. I do slip back into it sometimes. However, I'm becoming more conscious on switching after one coffee to a couple waters, right? You can still get a lot of energy from water. I think you don't realize that until you try it. How were you able to, obviously, studies were a massive part of it, but how were you able to kind of train yourself, I guess, to start to prioritize nutrition? What was it, everything to do with studies, or did you kind of want to start to train yourself before that?
So you're asking because I didn't do this until after my collegiate career. Are you asking kind of after I had transitioned into just
Yeah,
my
so like
mom?
you can always look back, even if you're the picture perfect portrait of nutrition, right? You can
Mhm.
always look back and say, oh, I should have done this better. Maybe I should have done this better, right? Once you had the recognition, I guess, that nutrition was important, how did you start to train yourself to then act on that recognition and not just get stuck in that phase?
Yeah, it's interesting. We talked about earlier how this podcast it was born on or from you struggling once you stopped playing your sport and your mental health got to be really poor. After I had stopped playing basketball, I almost tried to become the smallest version of myself possible, and I think a lot of female athletes can relate to this. And especially through Instagram, especially through like seeing the influencers on there and stuff. So personally, I got done with college basketball and I said, "Ooh, it's time to get small." Because college basketball, you want to be strong, you want to be sturdy, and in my mind, I had taught myself or told myself, "Nah, it's time to get small now and be the smallest version of myself possible." So I even cut back more on
Hmm.
eating until I discovered all of this nutrition stuff and until I finally became educated on it. And I got into that because I had seen myself go down a rabbit hole so much into trying to be the smallest version of myself. My mental health suffered. And I hated myself. I hated the way I looked, even though I was the smallest I had ever been. I didn't feel strong. I didn't feel healthy. And so it almost, through working with some inspiration from God and with my husband and stuff, it led me to kind of go face into what I feared the most, and that was nutrition. And so I started studying it and I started learning about it, and I just had all these epiphanies. So once I gained that education, I started with the basics, right? And I always tell my athletes this: we focus on the protein, we focus on the carbs, and we focus on the fats. I didn't even get super into like the micronutrients with the exact amounts of vitamins and minerals at that point. It's like, I just need to make sure that I'm eating enough to fuel my body, to fuel my workouts so that I can have mental clarity and that I'm not getting that 3 p.m. crash that most
Mm.
people get because you're not eating enough. So I started with the basics, and then you can move up from there and really dial in on things. And I'm still not perfect today, but I think it is all about moving up one level at a time. I think a lot of people make nutrition have to go to level 1 to level 10 really quick, and I don't see it like that at all.
Go Global is a free flowing technology company that handcrafts, embellishes, and manufactures garments and accessories. Designed on the principles of people, places, and possibilities, Go Global reimagines fashion and is inspired by you, the people of the world.
Yeah, I appreciate that point because I think as athletes, we understand the hard work and the training that goes into being at the top level in your sport or one of the top levels if you're collegiate. Most sports have professional opportunities above, but being at an elite level, if you will, that we shy away from the nutritional aspect of being elite because we know the work that goes into it. And we're like, oh, God, I had to do it for athletics. Now I'm going to have to do it for nutrition. Now I'm going to have to continue to do it for school. Now I'm going to have to continue to do it for sleep. And it's this giant, scary snowball that forms. I appreciate the point that you said it doesn't have to be level 100 right away. You don't have to take on the boss level right away. You can start by battling the mini levels, right? You can just focus on calories. You can pick a couple things, but that 1% better is ultimately what leads you to 10 and then 20 and then 30 before you're even thinking about it. How can we make nutrition convenient so that way it doesn't have to be level 100 right away? So that way we can tackle that 1%? Is there a way to make it convenient, or is it really one of those things where you just have to roll up your sleeves and say, all right, let's take the first step?
I'm gonna answer that with a question first. What do you think is the most intimidating thing getting into nutrition as an athlete?
Just understanding it, even like everyone's like, okay, you need to take care of your nutrition. My mind just goes to like water, eating a lot of chicken, and honestly, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. Like, just to be brutally honest, that's where my mind goes because you can get a lot of calories, you can take care of your protein, and water for me is the base building block for everything that I try to do. If I don't get enough water, I am the grumpiest human being. You don't want to be around me. But I think it's just understanding where to start. Like, how do we even start? Like, people are like, take care of your nutrition, and it's just like, cool, now what?
Mm-hmm. Okay. The first thing that I would say for people trying to just get involved into it is first you need to know how much you're eating. All right. So you
Mm.
can honestly, for people, it's like as simple, and it won't be perfect, but it will be close enough. It's called a BMR calculator online. And so you need to know how much your body actually needs, whether you're not training that much, whether you are in the middle of college baseball season training 10, 15, 20 hours a week. Like you can adjust it based off your activity level. um that's the first thing you need to know, just like how much you need to be eating, because you made the point of everyone needs different amounts of calories. Like what I eat as a 145-pound female who maybe trains 5 times a week just to stay fit is going to be far different than my 18-year-old self who was training 15 hours a week for performance. Like it's going to be a whole lot different. And so being able to calculate for your personal self, and it doesn't have to be that hard in the beginning. So know how much you need to eat. The second thing is I would just get a schedule. So once you know how much you need to eat, say that it came out to be 2,000 calories, all right? I would just break that up into simple meals. And so it's like, okay, 2,000 calories. I want to eat 3 meals a day. That means that's going to make up for 1,500 calories. So I eat 500-calorie meals. So 500 for breakfast, 500 for lunch, 500 for dinner. I've got an extra 500 left over. Oh, I'm going to do 2 snacks. Or if that's too hard for people, then like do 2,000 divided by 3, right? And then it's going to give you about 650 calories every single time you're eating. That will make it super simple. And then I always say, like, do the work on the front end so that you don't have to do any of the work on the back end. So if you're really serious about this and maybe you're living alone and don't like to cook a lot or something, like meal plan, meal prep, like make it so simple. And then taking it a step further from that. So you need to know how much you need to eat. You need to kind of just schedule it out throughout your day and just have kind of non-negotiable times. Even if you're not hungry, you're still going to do it because you know that's what your body needs. especially you athletes. I'm talking to you because if you skip meals, we can go into that later, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Don't skip meals. That's kind of like my number one Bible rule. Going back to the point of this, okay? Once you figure out like how much you need to be eating and the schedule that you're eating it at, then I would dive into what we like to call a performance plate. You want to have a fourth of your plate be chicken. You want to have, and this is for athletes, you want to have at least half of your plate be more of a complex carb. So that could be potatoes, that can be rice, that can be like, I love sweet potatoes, squash, quinoa, pasta, like anything like that. And then you want the other fourth of your plate to be made up of just some fruits and some vegetables. Technically, those are carbs, but I like to just say add 2 colors, taste the rainbow. That helps kind of get your micronutrients in without even thinking about it. And then the last thing is, because we want fats, we want carbs, and then we want protein. The fats come in from just cooking your protein in some olive oil, right? Or just adding some avocado or having some nuts on the side. So it can be as simple as that. If you want to have a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, sure, start there with some chicken, add some fruit in there and roll with that until you're ready to take it a step further.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I appreciate the point in the beginning to just meal prep even, because that saves so much time in a fast-paced world and in a fast-paced environment of not even just college athletics, but athletics in general. I remember in high school even, I would get up, go to school by 7, get out at 3, have 45 minutes to change, go to one soccer practice or tennis at the time, then go to my club practice, then come home, do homework. By the time I was even ready to eat, it was like 9 o'clock. So my whole meal schedule was thrown off. So I think athletes are so conditioned already to have like, I eat at 7 before school, then I eat at whenever my lunch is, whatever block that is, 12 to 1, and then I don't eat again till 9, that our bodies are already used to a lack of fueling, that when we try to fuel, it's very difficult. So meal prepping and bringing those meals along with you that don't necessarily need to stay cold, but if they do, bring a little lunch pail, little ice pack. That's what I started to do. But not until I moved in with my girlfriend. I don't know why. She kind of got me on that train. So kudos to her. But I guess asking you, are there other ways to make it convenient? Because whether we like it or not, we are a society of convenience. Are there other ways to kind of go off meal prepping to make getting enough nutrients inconvenient, so we don't have to spend $100 at the school store on food that's not going to fuel us?
I always tell my athletes to keep food in their locker and in their backpack, because they're always going to forget, and then they're going to have to go get the McDonald's or whatever. Because I will always say food, like, something is better than nothing. So if you have to eat the McDonald's, if it's McDonald's burger versus nothing, then go eat the burger. However, there's not so good, better, and best. And so the best solution, I would say, like, find some non-perishable snacks. It can be fruit leather. It can be, I really like these things called That's It bars from like Costco and Sam's Club. It can be granola bars. It can be jerky. I would just make sure dried fruit's always my favorite too. Just keep them in your backpack, keep them in your locker, just buy several cases of them at the beginning and just dump them in there so that you always know you have something to be reaching for right before practice. Or right before, like, if you go from practice to your training, keep it in your car, keep it in your mom's car, in the glove box. Like, always just have little stashes of certain snacks there for you, so that you don't even have to think about it and it just becomes a habit. That'd probably be like my number one piece of advice, like, especially for around training fueling.
Yeah, just keep it available. You'll munch on it if it's there. Everyone's guilty of it, right? Whether it's that bag of potato chips, which we're not advocating for, but when the food's in front of you, it will disappear eventually, whether it's when you want it to, or it'll just be gone. I promise. There's really no explanation for it. So if you can see it, you can eat it. Just to dumb it down is what I'm hearing. And I know a lot of coaches do that as well. A lot of the coaches' budget, at least at our school, is to have snacks. I know with the men's program and the women's program on the soccer side of things at Oswego State, our coaches just pooled in and bought a bunch of like bagels with peanut butter or jelly. And then we had we had Belvita bars. I don't know if you've heard of Belvita bars, but we've had those, which are really good. Don't know how healthy they are, but they're delicious. And then we just have like fruits and veggies on every away trip, like our clementines, our apples, our bananas. We have some some version of liquid IV. I'm not sure what it is, but I feel like that's like the chapstick of that kind of powder. Everyone just calls it liquid IV, even when it's not. But we had some replenishment powder, I guess I will call it. When to kind of backtrack a little bit, when you were a college athlete, what was available to you to snack on? And how has it changed? Like, what are the big takeaways? Like, I guess I heard it on Jay Shetty podcast the other day. He was chatting with Alicia Keys, and she said the gaps and the gifts that you get from everything. So the things that you realize you're missing and the things you take away. So I'll structure it that way. What were the gaps and the gifts that you got in college so then you could turn around and teach us how we need to fuel our body?
Let me tell you about the Sleep With Me podcast. If you struggle to get a good night's sleep like me, I need you to check out this podcast. Each episode is crafted to help you unwind, featuring gentle storytelling designed to ease your mind and guide you into restful slumber. I kid you not, whenever I'm anxious in bed at night, I turn it on, and before I know it, it's morning, and I'm as refreshed as I've ever been. I am not sure how it works, but trust me when I tell you, it does. So, join me and thousands of others who have turned restless nights into peaceful sleep with the help of the Sleep With Me podcast.
I would say that the gaps for sure was a lack of fueling for athletes, and that just happens. Division I sports, especially those higher level Division I schools, you're always going to have a snack bar, you're going to have the food bar, you're going to have a building dedicated towards student athletes. I live here in Utah, close to Brigham Young University, and they literally have a full building, a full, like 4 athletes, a cafe for them, meal center, everything at their disposal, which I think is incredible because these athletes, I mean, they're putting in a full-time job while they're going to full-time school. And so to have that luxury and the gift of that is incredible for them. Division II, Division III schools, junior college, NAIA, they don't have the luxury for that. So that was definitely a gap, and I understand why it was there. I had the college cafeteria that every athlete had access to. And so if I would have had the knowledge at the time of how much I needed to be fueling myself, the different times I needed to be fueling, I could have done it a lot better and created a schedule around it. But yeah, as far as snacks go, sometimes on the bus we would have help, but not a ton. It was more me going to Costco and loading up on stuff and putting them in my mini fridge in my dorm room and stuff. But definitely with the gifts, I mean, Colorado Mesa University was an incredible program, an incredible school, and the training facilities and the kind of the caliber of strength and conditioning coaches there was unmatched as well. Like I loved them. I was so grateful for them. The nutrition piece was missing for sure.
Yeah, again, your answers seem to be spot on, at least in my opinion. But where I first gravitate towards is with anything is recognition. That's the hardest part. Why are you eating too much? Why are you not eating enough? Once you can admit that to yourself, that's when you can start to make progress, right? And I always tie it back to athletics just because that's how my brain works. When you're in a game and you're wondering why you can't make the left-handed layup, why you can't catch the pass, why you can't break your personal best time, you start in practice and you make the mistake over again and over again and over again, and then you start to get a little better at it, and then you show up in a game and maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. Is that a viable approach to nutrition?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, nutrition, I think nutrition recovery, it's kind of all in one. I talk about sleep the same way I talk about nutrition, just those holes that everyone is missing, all that boring stuff that athletes think is lame and that they don't need is kind of what I I teach and talk about. But yeah, like fail forward. It exactly what you said. I think a lot of people think, especially athletes, because we have this perfectionism, this need for perfectionism, this need to look perfect and to not want to mess up. And so we never expose our blind spots or what we might suck at because we don't want to be seen as sucking at something. At least that's how I was. But yeah, like choose one thing this week, like get rid of the soda, replace it with the water, or If you're already kind of going down that way, add an extra, if you're kind of under eating and not gaining the weight or seeing the progress in the weight room, add an extra cup of rice to your each one of your meals, or start, make sure that you're eating at least 60 to 100 carbs an hour and a half before a game. Just start with something and then just stack. I like to call it like stacking days, stacking weeks, like just keep leveling up, like we've talked about. Choose the one thing, level up. And my Instagram's full of the one things and the some things to be working on. So you can, if you ever need to know what to work on, you just go there and it'll teach you. But I definitely think failing forward is the way to go. You don't need to be perfect at all in the beginning. You just need to start trying.
Yeah, and how do you move past those failures? Because again, as athletes, we miss the shot and then we line right back up and we want to take it again and we don't leave until we hit it again. How can we do that with nutrition when it's more difficult to, the day has already passed, right? And we haven't got enough calories. We can't just hit rewind and go line up again and try and eat that extra bowl of rice. We have to kind of learn from it and pull our bootstraps up and go again tomorrow. How can we learn and almost, again, it is a lot of training that goes into it, which makes it scary, right? But at the same time, that's what's beautiful about it. That's what we do our entire life as athletes. We train and we try to perform. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. How do we kind of take it on the chest and say, yeah, I didn't get that today. Let's try again tomorrow.
It sounds so vanilla and so funny, but nightly planning, just a
Ah,
nightly check-in with yourself. That's kind of my favorite thing to do if I'm in a cut or if I'm in a bulk or if any of my athletes are. It's like, it sounds so silly to nightly plan, especially for a 17-year-old kid or a 19-year-old college kid. They're like, planning, that's dumb. Like, I'm not going to do that. But it's like, you sit
I
down,
already
you
have
take
a planner for classes. Come on now.
yeah, exactly. It's like you sit down, you take 5 minutes, and maybe it's when you're planning your homework for tomorrow too, and you say, what did I do well today? Cool. Write it down or whatever. Acknowledge that. Give yourself the W. And then what do I need to change tomorrow? What did I not like about what I did today? And then it allows their brain to kind of go to work and say, see, you know what? I didn't wake up on time this morning, which means I didn't have time to pack my lunch, which means I didn't eat the lunch, which means my practice sucked, which means I got frustrated, and down goes the domino chain. But if you're able to kind of catch that pattern and say, I either need to set my alarm 10 minutes earlier, or I can pack my lunch and keep it in the fridge overnight. Perfect. Like, that's how I'm going to change tomorrow. I think it can be very simple. And then the next day, do the same thing. And then I think that, again, like that's how I say, that's how it kind of starts stacking days. You start getting in the habit of doing your lunch at night. Sweet. And then you start getting in the habit of making sure your backpack is always stocked with fruit leather and dried fruit and granola bars to make sure you have a pregame snack. Perfect. And then you just keep stacking days and keep making small changes to where in 6 months you have become this nutrition guru without ever even trying.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I couldn't help but smile that whole time because I used to sit here and think, I'm not good at it. People tell me which classes to take and when to take them, and I have these options. People tell me when practices, like I don't choose anything for myself. It's all spoon spoon fed. I told you English was going to be tough. It's all spoon fed to me. We'll try that one more time. It's all spoon fed to me. That when it comes to nutrition, it's like, how do I do it myself? Right? And those are beautiful habits to get yourself into of one thing at a time. Because like I mentioned, everything, almost everything for athletes is this is when you're doing it, this is who you're doing it with, and this is how it's supposed to be done if you want your best chance of winning. And then go take care of your nutrition is what it feels like. So when we get these little habits, these 1% better, as James Clear kindly puts it in all of his pieces of work, it starts to feel good when you start to believe in yourself, even if your performance on the field isn't as good or you're not getting the minutes that you want, or you are, right? You have something to back it up with. You can say, hey, at least I have control of this part of my life. No one's telling me what I can or cannot eat. They're just giving me a bunch of options and then say, here, you go for it. Can we use that to our advantage when it feels like it could be this big, dark, scary place? So that fruit leather in your backpack, that water or those snacks in your locker, if your locker room is conducive, fantastic places to start that you get to choose, right? And I think the power of choice is so important because you can choose to continue to do what's best for your body, or you can wait another day. Is there a moment, an aha moment you think an athlete goes through where they say, all right, today's the day I'm going to choose? Or is it one of those things where, like, hey, the train's making the stop, you can jump on this time, or you can jump on the next time around?
That's a tough answer. I think it depends on the athlete and on what their goals are.
Okay.
If if you have if you take athlete A and athlete B and they both have skill, they both have talent, they're both training hard. Let's say that they're in high school, okay? So you as a coach, you're looking at recruiting them and they have similar things, similar skills, similar strengths, similar speed, similar everything. But this athlete A chooses to jump on the taking care of your body, sleep, nutrition, fueling it, train, versus athlete B wait 6 months after this athlete A, the window could be small, especially in the recruiting period to get that right. Right. And so 6 months later, you see athlete A next to athlete B. Athlete A has seen, even though the training was the same, athlete A has seen major speed increases, major strength increases, major performance differences in that fourth quarter play. Like everything is just better and she has an edge versus this athlete B. And most athletes, that's the kicker. Most of you athletes don't even know what you're missing. You think that you're performing well, and this is always my argument. You think that you're performing well and that you don't need nutrition or that you're eating enough already. And I'm like, I promise you, you have not even, if you think you've hit your ceiling, you have not even like seen it yet. Like if you start focusing on this stuff and you can dive in as quickly as possible, and that's why that's why we've created, that's why I have a business, right? That's what our programs are all about. You can dive in as quickly as possible or as slowly as possible, but the window between athlete A and athlete B, it might be harder for this athlete B to catch up to this athlete A if they put it off for too long and if they procrastinate it. On the flip side, it's better to start now than to be pissed off that you didn't start 6 months ago and to put it off another 6 months. Because then there's going to be this other athlete that you're kind of being looked at against by this other school, and I'm kind of looking at it from a competitive standpoint and from a recruitment standpoint, because that's what we work with a lot. That does that make sense to you? I'm
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. And I think it goes back to even what you called your vanilla nightly check-in, right? Once you decide, okay, nutrition is something I might want to focus on, why? If it is to get faster, stronger, more elusive, whatever you need for your sport, whatever you defined as your goals, it's easier to slow down and kind of pull the reins on that than it is to play catch up, right? If you're athlete B trying to catch up to A. So if you're thinking about it and you've clearly defined your goals, because I think that is so important. You can't just say, yeah, I want to jump into nutrition, sleep, whatever you're going, even sports. You can't just say, I want to play soccer with no goal in mind, right? Like, okay, do you want to be a defender? Do you want to be a goalie? Like once you figure out what you need out of your nutrition and then you need to take action, do it sooner rather than later, because it's easier to stop and peel back, like I said, than be so far behind that your goals are going to be that much more difficult to achieve.
And if you're an athlete playing recreational soccer and you kind of want to do nutrition recreationally, that is amazing.
Yeah.
And nutrition, like that will serve you so well throughout your life. And when you're a mom or a dad and you're trying to teach your kids and you want to just have a healthy life and live a healthy life, like I'm a huge advocate for that too. So I'm not saying like if you aren't a serious athlete, don't do this, don't work on your nutrition. You probably just have a little bit more of the liberty of taking it kind of one level and one day at a time, how we've been discussing. Whereas these athletes who may be in the recruiting process right now and may not be getting the results and the looks that they want to be getting at the moment, this will be a separator. This will give you the edge that you're missing and that you probably didn't even know you were missing at the time. Kind of like we talked about earlier. I didn't know I was missing it. I think that honestly could have been the difference between that and my mental aspect. We haven't even really gone into that. That could have been the difference between me playing Division 2 versus me playing D1. Like what were those little separators that I didn't even know I was missing. So
Yeah, two places I want to go with this before we kind of switch gears a little bit. The reason that this little conversation is even happening, I'm not going to downplay it. This is not a little conversation. This is groundbreaking. No, the reason that we're even sitting here in this moment talking to each other today, though, is because nutrition and mental health are so aligned, right? So if you are that recreational athlete, eating properly and getting enough nutrients is going to do wonders for your mental health. I know, kind of candidly off camera, I told you if I don't drink water, I'm a grump. Well, yeah, that has nothing to do with how I'm performing on the field. That's if I perform poorly on the field or when I played, it would just, again, snowball and I'd be even more of a grump and you wouldn't want to get in my way. To you, the connection between proper nutrition and mental health, how significant is that on just a day-to-day basis for every individual?
I always say if you put crap in, you'll get crap out. And so, and we as a society, we're consuming crap a lot. We're consuming like how many hours of Instagram and TikTok and Facebook, and how many hours of, or how many, maybe McDonald's, not to throw shade at you, Caleb, McDonald's runs or junk food or soda, like how many superficial things are we doing like that? And we're just consuming crap. How many hours of TV are we sitting on our gluteus maximus and like watching it, like if we put crap in constantly, you get crap out. And I'm not saying like I'm probably one of the biggest sweet tooths, like I spend too much time on Instagram as well sometimes. And so I'm not saying you have to be perfect with it, or that your mental health will be absolute crap if you had some McDonald's and a milkshake that day. Like it's fine, right? I'm not trying to breed perfectionism in these athletes or these people that are listening to this podcast. I'm just saying, like, if that is a part of who you are, is just constantly eating crap, constantly consuming crap on your phone, constantly consuming just junk in general, then don't be surprised if you feel like crap and if you feel like junk. Because how is your brain, like, if you're not fueling your brain with amazing books and fueling your brain with podcasts that will help you, like this one, or fueling your body with fruits and with vegetables and with protein and water, like, why would you expect yourself to feel good or to have your brain be healthy when you're doing nothing to help it be healthy, if that makes sense? So yeah, I think there's definitely a correlation, not in the way that you have to be perfect and stick to your meal plan perfectly, but just those kind of constant daily habits of what are you putting in to get, like, what seeds are you planting to get this fruit tree? And if it's not the right fruit, then it comes back to the seed. So
Yeah, it's like a constant pursuit for progress, not perfection. I think, again, mental health, nutrition, anything, right? The reason humans evolved is because we want to get better. It doesn't come with perfection. You ask any leader, they failed more times than they succeeded. You ask any podcast host, they've had way more poor episodes or stumbles or stutters than they have viral videos. You ask any nutritionist, I'm sure they had a prior life experience that set something off inside of them that said, hey, I just want to get a little bit better. Now that I figured it out, why be selfish, right? I spent all the time and the effort to figure out to better myself. I have a gift that's worth something. Let's give it to other people. But to kind of transition into another portion of this episode, to kind of focus on the role mental health has on nutrition, not nutrition on mental health, even though I think it kind of goes both ways. I don't think you can kind of say one influences the other all the time. It's like water, if you will. It just kind of exists. This can be a heavy question for you, so I hope you're buckled in. Are people addicted to poor nutrition? And if they are, why do you think we are? Like, why do you think we're addicted to that feeling of, oh, I need McDonald's, I need McDonald's, I need McDonald's?
Addiction is a strong word for anything.
Okay.
My husband actually is getting his master's like in the mental health field right now, and he consumes a lot of content like that. My mother-in-law is in the mental health field. I have a lot of different family members who are good at this stuff and who have really helped me see clarity. So I think addiction is a strong word, because if we're thinking of addiction in the way of like I just always want it and I can't help but get on my phone and stuff. Like, yeah, but sometimes the definition of addiction, like what it is, you can't live without it, and you will like feel physical withdrawals without it, and like everything like that. And so sometimes I think that we might use that word a little too strongly. Like, I don't think anyone, maybe some people are, but most people aren't full on addicted to junk food or addicted to things, but we do rely heavily on the feelings that it gets us. And the reason I say this is we all have negative feelings come up in our lives. We all are trying to avoid some type of feeling, whether it's boredom, whether it's frustration, whether it's annoyance, whether it's sadness, whatever it might be. And we call it, what it's called, a buffer is what we like to call it. We like to find things that buffer us. And so for me, my buffer is chocolate. Like, if I'm sad, like I'm going to be probably going, like finding myself like in my, I don't have it all the time, but in my little jar with I have chocolate with. Or I also like to go to Instagram if I'm like annoyed and it's been a long day, or I just had a disagreement with someone or whatever it might be. I will find myself scrolling on Instagram without even knowing it, because it gives us that numb feeling, or that kind of instant hit of like, oh, I don't even have to think about it. Like, oh, like that instant dopamine hit of, oh, just gives me an exhale, a time to breathe. And then you kind of, I always call it, do you remember Percy Jackson?
Yeah.
Have you
Yeah.
watched him? Okay, when like he's in the Lotus Hotel and he finally wakes up and he finally realizes how long he's been there. Do you remember that at all?
I mean, I read the book. I never saw the.
Okay, well, let me backtrack a little bit. In this hotel, Percy Jackson, they eat this lotus flower, and him and his friends, and they were told not to eat this lotus flower because once they do, they get sucked into the casino, and they're there. I don't know how long they were there, probably at least a week, without even knowing it. And it felt like a couple hours. And then they finally wake up. They finally come to realization of, oh my goodness, like they snap out of it. I think that Instagram or junk food or these episodes that kind of we go through that we consider ourselves addicted to is almost like a lotus flower in a way, if that makes us sucked in a little bit more, and then finally we wake up from it. So the moral of the story that I'm trying to say is, I don't think necessarily that people are addicted to junk food. I think that we all are just trying to deal with negative feelings. And so becoming aware of, hey, I want to go eat McDonald's right now because I'm just sad and had a crappy day at practice and coach yelled at me. Interesting. I can feel that feeling and feel frustration without going and getting McDonald's, or I can go get it and maybe I'll order something a little bit better, because you've become aware of the feeling that's trying to push you towards the poor action that you're trying to not do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that. And I love how you handled that question, because I did tell you to buckle in, and you hit it perfectly. I think the concept of what we get out of our actions or our choice, whether sometimes they're involuntary or voluntary, is what is the true stem for anything in mental health, right? That's when you go to therapy, that's what they try to help you understand, right? They never force it out of you or anything. You have to come to that realization on your own 99% of the time, right? But once you get there, once you get that, oh, I want, again, for lack of better analogies or descriptors here, once you, oh, coach yelled at me, I want McDonald's, right? It's, oh, coach yelled at me, I'm feeling sad, this is my comfort food. Can we retrain ourselves? Again, lack of better terms for me on this end, not being a nutrition guru, can we retrain ourselves to turn an apple into our comfort food rather than chocolate or a scoop of ice cream?
I don't know if I know the answer to that question. In the deep mind parts of things, that would be a really cool thing to ask. And I'm actually having a podcast with a sports psychologist from Brigham Young University soon. So that I should put that in my list of questions, because I'm not sure the straight answer to that. What I understand is it comes down to being able to sit with your feelings in a way of like, I don't think we necessarily have to replace it. And you can, I'm sure. But if you had a crappy day, you had a crappy practice, coach yelled at you, you feel sad. And sometimes it's letting go of pride to acknowledge that you feel sad, especially for males. It's hard to acknowledge your feelings and to say, yeah, I feel sad right now. Doesn't mean you have to tell anyone, but you can just acknowledge it and say, I feel sad. Turn on a sad song and let yourself feel that on the car ride home. Like, I think that's completely fine. We don't have to give up our agency though, or our control. Like, we always have our choice. Um, we never are forced to go to McDonald's. We never are forced to get on our phones and scroll on Instagram. It's a choice, and much of the time a habit that we have. But habits can be broken. And so I always tell people, what you're not changing, you're choosing. And so if you're choosing to not change it, then you're okay with keeping it right now. And this is where it can get hard, because people have real mental illness and have to work with therapy. Like, so I'm just talking about like the general population of, like, sometimes we struggle with things and struggle with negative feelings. It's like, okay, well, if you feel sad that you're 50 pounds overweight, like, this whole podcast is coming down to just choices and stacking days for me. But it's like, choose one thing to do different tomorrow. Then, like, choose different, right? And then the next day, choose something else different. And then the next day, choose something else different. And slowly we become, our mind and body kind of become in sync and are trying to play for you instead of always play against you.
Yeah, this is why you're so important. This is why your job is so important, because again, it's what makes it scary, but it's what makes it so beautiful, is there is so many choices, right? If the feeling of sadness is what is allowing you to even have the choice of picking an unhealthy or comfort food, can we combat the source of the sadness? Or if we can't combat the source of the sadness, can we combat the next thing, or the next thing in line, or the next thing in line, before it comes down to choosing between a healthy or an unhealthy comfort food? But it goes back to having people in your profession to kind of help us through that, right? Because that wasn't even a thought when I asked the initial question, was choice. I went straight to the strongest word, right? Addiction, which you so beautifully kind of deconstructed for us, which I appreciate. So we've covered a lot so far in this episode. I kind of wanted to turn the floor over to you to talk about what you wanted, some things you might have seen in people you've worked with so far that have been successful, and maybe some things that they were struggling with that weren't so successful that you've helped them turn around.
From a nutrition or from a mental standpoint, or both?
However you like. This is usually in this part of the episode, I like to just turn it back over to the guests and kind of let them spew their wisdom, because people hear me every episode. They're tuning in to hear you.
The first, when athletes start working with me, the first module, I should say, the first call we go through, the intro call, is all about defining their future self. And the reason for that, and it sounds funny, we are evolving Next Level Athletes to be more than just nutrition, like I said, just because it started as a nutrition coaching business for elite high school athletes and elite collegiate athletes who didn't have the luxury of being at a Division I school with an amazing nutritionist on their team. It's evolving to be part of that, but also have the tools for the mental health side, for the mental performance side, for the mental toughness, for what college coaches actually look for. And I call it a mind, body, spirit approach. And from the spirit aspect is, no, I don't teach about God necessarily, even though I am a Christian and I believe in God. But the spirit that you bring to your team, the spirit that you bring to your teammates, and the ability that you have to add to your team, even if you're sitting on the bench, like, that's what college coaches look for. So we also teach those things too. But going back to when I sit down with kids, we talk about the first thing is like, who is your future self? What do you want that to be? And it's really funny, and not funny, it's really cool to see a 16-year-old kid who might not be asked deep questions like that a lot think on it and be like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm here to gain 20 pounds of muscle. Like, what are you talking about? And it's like, no, just like play along with me. So to you, those of you listening, like, think about it. Like, this comes from a book called Your Future Self Now, Benjamin Hardy. Great read for any of you. Like, go read it after this or listen to it. But it's all about, like, 5 years from now, or even 3 years from now, think about who you want your future self to be. So if you're a 15-year-old athlete right now, what is 18-year-old you doing? Where are they playing? Are they playing? Is that your future self, or is that the future self that your parents have constructed in you? Like, what is the future self that you want to be, and where do you want that to be at? And then I have them think of like, okay, who's a role model that you would absolutely love to be? And sometimes I have them think like, obviously, of the athletic side of a role model, and then maybe from an intellect side or an academic side. So kind of pick almost a vision board of people who you really admire from an athletic standpoint, from a mental performance standpoint, like whatever it might be. And then we work backwards and say, okay, if this is where you want to be, if you want to be playing at Vanderbilt University and you want to be studying this and you want to be crushing it and having at least a 3.8 GPA, what do you think you need to be like, it comes down to choices. I'm telling you, Caleb, like, what do you think you need to be doing now to be that future self currently? Like, it's all about, you're going to be that 18-year-old self one day. It's going to be your choice whether you want to take steps away from or towards that future self that you're trying to build. And so I have them picture this mountain. And I said, I love the mountains because I live all around them. So there's this huge mountain in the distance, and that is your future self. That is who you're trying to be. It's intimidating, it's big, but it's exciting and thrilling. And so you see, okay, that's who I want to be. Like, write your goals down, put it up, like, do everything. And then every single day it comes down to choices. Am I going to choose to take a step towards or away from my future self? And that's not to breed perfectionism. If you take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, you're still having a net gain, right? But it's all about figuring out who you want to be. If that's an athlete, figuring out where you want to be as an athlete, the type of player you want to be, how you want to be contributing to your team, even if you're a freshman and you might not be playing much at a high level Division I school at that moment. Like, what does that look like? Backtrack it and then start choosing 1 or 2 things every single day or every single month to be adding into your life to become that person. So when I do this with athletes, we deconstruct it and we say, okay, this person is training hard at least 4 times a week. They're also doing skill work. They're showing up to practices, but doing stuff outside of practice. They're fueling their body. They're getting 8 hours of sleep. And so we come up with this huge list, and it can be really intimidating at first, but then we pick, okay, this month, let's work on these 2 things. Next month, let's work on these 2 things. And we just build on it. And then all of a sudden they just become the future self that they wanted to be. And even if it's not at the Vanderbilt University that they had dreamed of, they feel so secure and so proud of themselves because they know that they had done everything possible to get to where they wanted to be. And so that they can sit with peace with that. So that's my words of wisdom for you guys now, whether it be nutrition, whether it be training, whether it be athletics, whether it be if you're just in the workplace and trying to be a better dad or mom, like, you can be your future self. You just got to start one choice at a time. So.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the backward front approach, because all of this is choices, but also trusting and believing in yourself. And that is the hardest thing, right? I always say, like I said at the beginning, okay, cool, take care of your nutrition. Where do I start? It's like, dude, you can pour a bowl of cereal. Just go do it. Like, just start. When you define that, it doesn't have to be your end goal, but when you define one of your milestones that you want to hit, right? And you slowly build a roadmap. Like you said, you could have 3 different turns. You could hit a red light, run through a stop sign, whatever. When you have that roadmap and you start to check off those destinations on the way, that's when you start to believe in yourself. That's when you start to trust yourself and say, hey, wait a minute. Like, just because I might not be getting X amount of minutes, just because I might not be at Vanderbilt, doesn't mean I'm not successful. Doesn't mean I'm not where I'm supposed to be. It just starts from within. And I think if you don't have any direction, if you don't have a goal, if you don't have those milestones, and you don't know what's within, how are you going to know where to go? I've been in the seat of the 16-year-old who wanted to play Division I sports, ended up at a mid-sized Division III college and wouldn't have changed it for the world. So if you didn't end up at D1 or D2 or D3 or wherever you thought you were supposed to be, you're not a failure. You're where you're meant to be. And 5 years later, when you're in my seat, I hope you truly believe that. But Kelsey, are you ready for the final question on this episode of the Make Mental podcast? We ask all of our guests. It's not as big as scary as my questions have been, but if there is one person, this is kind of has nothing to do with the episode, but I always love the answer. If there is one person in the entire world who you think needs a hug right now, who would you give it to and why?
Probably my little brother in Brazil. I talked about how I served a church mission. I told you that earlier. And I was actually in Brazil too. It's random. You don't get to choose. And so you naturally just get assigned there. And so he's been there for 4 months now and he's learning the language. He's going to be there for 2 years. So I'd transport there and give him a big old hug and say, hey, you're doing the thing. Like you're serving God, you're serving people, and you're exactly where you need to be, and just reassure him of that. So that's who I'd go give a hug to at this moment.
That is awesome. No selfish part of you just to get back to Brazil. Just a genuine hug there.
I might want to go while I'm there, but
the subconscious wants you back in Brazil.
Stuff like that, but that might be 10% selfish, 90% wanting to just hug my brother.
No, I love it. I always love to see who gives hugs to who, and I think you're brother number 2. I don't think you're brother number 1. I think one other guest said brother, but it's not a popular answer, sibling. It's just fascinating to me who, like, when people think of who they want to give hugs, who comes to mind. And I'm sure your brother will receive that hug if he follows you on any form of social media. We'll make sure to get it over to him. But Kelsey, where can anyone who's listening to us who doesn't already follow you or utilize your beautiful services get a hold of you if they're interested in anything that you have to do with nutrition?
Oh man, guys, I've recently expanded everywhere. So I'm Kelsey Poulter on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. I'm most known on Instagram right now because that's all I've been doing for a while, and I've been told I need to get on other platforms. So my handle on Instagram is @Kels, KELS, Poulter, POULTER. And then our website is www.nextlevelathletes.us, and you can check out our programs there if you're interested. So,
yeah, and we'll be sure to drop all that in the show notes below. And if at the very least you need help finding her, just message us if that's easier for you, right? I'm all about that convenience. So message us and we'll send her account over to you. But Kelsey, it has been an absolute pleasure to chat nutrition and mental health. And I appreciate you not shying away from the hard questions. I think that is so important. I wanted to ask a lot of questions that got asked to me, to someone who knows what they're talking about. So please, at the very least, go and follow her because you might need her one day, right? And like I said, convenient. If you're scrolling across Instagram, at least you're going to get some healthy habits on your feed. Again, we could tie all of this back together, but it just comes down to that choice of following Kelsey. So go ahead and do it. Thank you again one last time, Kelsey, for joining us here on the Make Mental podcast. We appreciate you, and we are excited to see what level Next Level Athletes can reach.
Thank you, Caleb. Appreciate being on.